such a joy to be in worship and to be able to freely express to God how good He is, the joy of Calvary. Give our voices, Big Dan, Charles, Tyrone, Hilda, Jonathan. Thank you, ushering us into worship tonight. We're going to get right down to it because we have a very special guest to myself and to this church here with us tonight. Mount Sinai, let's warmly welcome them once again. Pastor Terry Brown, his wife, Karen Brown. Let's begin tonight by telling us a little bit about your background, where you're from, how you each other met, first date. Give us all the goods on that.
How much time do we have? Good evening. It is wonderful to be here. Praise God. And we thank God for Pastor Hurt for his just ingenuity. This is something that does not happen typically in our church, and it should have been happening. But I'm grateful that God gave him the vision and the voice to make it happen. And we're honored to be here. The background question. So I am from Houston, Texas, Lone Star State. Amen. Who's that? From born in the 5th Ward section of Houston, Texas. Oh, y'all shout out 5th Ward, but y'all. Amen. 5th Ward, wonderful place to be from. And I'm grateful for that. But lived in Houston all of my life, except for the last 15 years that I've been here. And so that's where I'm from.
All right, let's see.
Hello. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. We give God all the praise and glory. We thank God for Pastor Hurt, as that has already been mentioned. I am from a little city in Texas, down in the Gulf, called Corpus Christi, Texas. It's called the Sparkling City by the Sea. And I lived there for 8 years, and then I moved to Houston after that.
Yeah, it's the country, but you know.
And how did you two meet?
I'm going to let you take care of that.
So the story goes,
We need to know how y'all met.
After 15 years or so now, it's...
we met at Texas Southern University, HBCU. Shout out to the HBCUs. So we were students in the same class. I was a younger student, and he was an elder student in the class. The same age as the teacher. So we were sitting in class, and I noticed this young man come into the class, and I thought he was particularly different. You know, most guys come in with jeans and tennis shoes. He came suited and booted. And so he stood out. And so I recognized him, and then I just paid attention. And I didn't know he was paying attention to me, but I was paying attention to him. And then that was one day, and another day passed. I think we had Tuesday, Thursday class. And you know, those classes are longer. Those days are longer. And so it was before our class one day, and he came out prior to the class. And I noticed him, and I just let him know, oh, you're in my class. And we started talking. And what you gonna say?
And been talking ever since. My rendition is similar, honestly. I saw this young lady, and she mentioned standing out. She was a jewel. And I had been looking at her, so I thought a lot longer than she. I didn't know she noticed me, let alone was checking me out. But I looked at her. I saw the way that she interacted with people. I saw the way she carried herself, and I got to be honest. I wasn't thinking at the time this could be the mother of my children, but I was thinking that this is somebody who is special. And so the opportunity presented itself, and it's amazing how, when I think back over it now, how I had this girl on my mind, and one day, I guess it was before class started, I just happened to go outside. There's a little porch or patio, or whatever they call that, and there she was. And I don't know if you've ever had one of those kind of moments where the person you were thinking about just shows up where you are. And now all of a sudden I got to try to figure out something to say. I'm tongue-tied and all of that. And fortunately, she broke the ice and uttered the first words. And I kid you not, from the moment we met until 5 minutes ago, we have talked every day from then. I don't know how many days and years that is. I guess it's about 18 years ago now. We have talked every day without few exceptions, and so it's been a joyful ride. I like what she has to say for the most part.
Yeah, we talked that day probably hours. We sat on that porch and talked for hours, and we went to.
Did they go to class?
Yeah. Right, so we went to class. We did go to class.
I gotta say this, and this, I don't know what kind of lesson this is for somebody. So in that day, I was driving what at one time had been a brand new Toyota pickup truck, extra cab, big tires on it, all of that. But by the time I met her, it had lost its lust. It was a hoopty. It was so jacked up. I couldn't open the passenger side from the outside. So I couldn't be a gentleman and do all of that. I had to go inside my driver's side, unlock her, all of that. At any rate, I used it as a test because I wanted to see how this woman, because up until now, she's all, we're engaged in conversation and we agree on things and all of that. I wanted to see her response to getting into my hoopty. And she got into that hoopty as if it were a Bentley. I don't know if she paid attention to the dents. I don't know how you missed them, but I don't know.
So, ladies, have you ever, well, I don't know if you're with your spouse, you might not want to reminisce, but think about if you have ever known someone who worshiped their car. And back then, when, as a young woman, I knew people who had worshiped their cars. And so when he offered to drive me to my car, so we were parked, he parked in one lot and I was parked in another lot on campus. And when he offered to drive me to my car, I was thinking, okay, now, if this is some fabulous car, I know he's just out to show off. And man, we walked into the car. I thought, what? Wow. But I thought that he was a real person. That he wasn't ashamed to put me in his raggedy hoopty with the dents on the door and the bumper hanging off and, the door that don't open, all of that.
In these conversations, was there ever a formal first date, or was it just kept in casual encounters or something like that? Was there ever, may I take you out, and did that ever happen? Is that too Hollywood?
No. We did have a first date.
Okay.
Well, a little backstory, was that after I found the number again?
Oh, you should tell that story.
Well, so the day we met, we exchanged numbers. I was a diligent student, and so I hung out in the education building, which was where my major, all my major classes were there. And somehow, I don't know if somebody stole it. I don't know. I lost her number. These were days when there were no cell phones. No, I don't know, she may have had a beeper or something, I don't know. But I lost her number, and I looked high and low. I couldn't find it. And I think I went home for the weekend or whatever, and when I came back to school, I believe that Monday, I found the number. Nobody but God could have done this, I'm telling y'all. This girl was in my heart now, after one conversation.
But she waited the whole weekend
Yes,
for the call.
yeah, she waited.
So it was almost on to the next.
Yeah, I get it. But, I hate for you to have missed all of this. So we did finally, I did get the number. I called her. And our first date was at this little sandwich shop called Antone's in Houston. Back then, it was a real kind of, I don't know if it was high end necessarily, but it was a nice little spot. It was neutral. It was not a spot where, it wasn't a club. It wasn't a place where we were going to be in an intimate environment. Just a nice kind of cozy little. And I recall us just having conversation that just, you just never want it to end. I don't know if anybody knows what that's like. It's just the more you talk, the more you want to talk, and you're interested in all of her ideas, all of her thoughts, and everything like that. So that was my recollection of the first date.
Yeah, we got another recollection here. So, yes.
So I didn't really know. Well, first of all, we met. I didn't have him pick me up. That's a word to somebody.
Because I had moved to you.
Well, I didn't want him to come to my house. I don't know you like that. So we met there, and then we had lunch, or he had lunch, because I didn't even eat that day. I remember it being, you remember that? Yeah, you ordered a sandwich, and I didn't order anything. I ordered some water or something. You know how we do. I ain't really hungry. But, so, yeah, I didn't really get the feeling that he liked me at that meeting. You recall? Yeah. I didn't really get the feeling that he was into me. And so I left there feeling like, okay, I don't really know where this is going. I called my cousin, who was my best friend at the time, and told her, yeah, he's really cute, this, that, and the other, but I don't know if he's into me. And so I just left it at that. I didn't know if we would have another meeting or not. Yeah.
So how did the other meeting take place? He ate, you didn't eat. Did he still make you pay half? He paid for something? Oh, okay.
No. I've been picking up checks for a long time. And I must say, she picks up checks as well. So she's never been just that you got to take care of me kind of woman. She's always been in a position. In fact, about it, I had the hoopty. She had the nicer car and all of that. And so,
How did the relationship evolve to boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, and all that? How did that evolve?
The all-night conversations
Yeah, really?
developed. We had all-night conversations, and we spent time together, and so we went to church together.
Amen.
You didn't tell that story when we met. And so when we met, something about him. I come from a pastoral, not a pastoral family, but my great-grandfather and other relatives were pastors. And so for some reason, I sensed that in him. And he didn't tell me that. But I sensed that in him, and I asked him the question, are you a minister? And not that I was looking for that, let me be clear. But I sensed that in him. And then he said,
What did you say?
I said, I don't know, what did I say?
he said, yes, I have accepted my calling to preach, but I have not preached my first sermon yet.
Right. Yeah, so this is way back.
And so then he asked the question of how did the relationship evolve?
Yeah, communication, I think, was the key to us really developing a connection that was beyond the surface of physical. We got an opportunity to hear one another's heart, to explore one another's soul, and yea, even to deal with spiritual matters. And I think I contribute that season as really the impetus for everything that happened after that. The fact she mentioned all-night conversations, not that we were together all night. I had a job working at a bank that I worked from midnight to 6 in the morning, something like that, 4, 5, 6, I don't remember. But and I had no supervision, and so I'm on the phone with her all night long, and she's going to sleep on the phone, acting like she's not asleep. Well, why don't you hang up? No, you hang up. No, you. And that went on, I mean, nightly, and we just got to know each other. It was such I guess an intimate connection that we really got to know each other well.
An instant connection.
Yeah, it was pretty instant.
And I mentioned church because our dates we were going to church. We would go to prayer bowl on New Year's Eve and or New Year's Day, and revivals at his grandmother's church, and it was always church. And so I mentioned that because most of our dates were like that.
There were some holy children. So, when did y'all start going together, and when did y'all propose in marriage and all this other stuff? Because y'all did more than church and talk on telephone.
George suggested a second ago, y'all are the holy children. We were not. In the sense that we were far from perfect. And so after we had begun this relationship that we deemed to be exclusive, we conceived our son. We were not married. And I share that with all of the conviction, all of the obvious guilt at the time that goes with that territory. We let people down. I was one of the preachers, one of the sons of Mount Corinth, our pastor, A. Lewis Patterson Jr. The hardest conversation I've ever had to have was to tell my pastor, who had placed me over his young adults, placed me as a Sunday school teacher over the youth, and I've got to tell him that me and my girlfriend have conceived a child. And Pastor Patterson, with as much sternness and yet with as much compassion as he could muster, I was sitting in his office crying, I'm weeping, I'm bawling. And he says, Terry, I got to tell you, I got to be honest with you, that's a strike against you. And at this point, I'm thinking he's going to strip off, everything. He said, but you still have more swings at the bat, or something to that effect. You still get more swings at it. And so he was telling me that while yes, I was wrong, and yes, I was putting the cart before the horse, he let me know that grace abounded. And I don't know if anybody needed to hear that tonight. but he also made it clear that while the act of premarital sex was a sin, is a sin, that baby, that child was not a sin. And so we've been able to forge ahead from that point.
How long from there did you all get married? From there, engaged?
Pretty quick.
We essentially waited, Pastor Patterson, after Brown shared with him what was going on, we waited for a date. And it was getting kind of sketchy because, you know, after a while you start showing it, folks are like, something going on. I knew she was pregnant. I ain't all that. And so about 4 months into our pregnancy, we got married.
Praise God. And where did you all, what was your profession at that point? Were you all finished school, still in school? Where you were?
I was still a student. I was a third-year student at Texas Southern University in the communications department. And, yeah.
And Pastor Brown, where were you?
No, I had not yet finished at that point either. And that was like my second go-round of college, because as she kind of alluded, I was an old man in school. And, but once we got married, we kind of came to an agreement that I would go on and finish, because I think I was probably a little further down the line. I probably had enough in time spent at school to have paid for buildings on the campus and all of that. And so it was, my graduation date came a little quicker. And so I finished, and then once I finished, we were married, then I finished school, and then Karen subsequently finished school shortly after.
The progression to work, what were you doing as far as profession? What was the adjustment period? Because it seems like it was something that kind of happened more sooner than you all expected. And so what was those early days like? Was it just bliss or trial and error? What was going on there?
Yeah. Well, it was the adjustment period is a great description of it. So we got married April 11th, 1992. At the time, I was working for First Interstate Bank, which is now Wells Fargo. And it so happened that the Houston branch and the department that I worked for was moving to Tempe, Arizona. And whoever wanted to go to Tempe, Arizona could go. I did not want to go. I'm married now, and there's no place I'd rather live than Houston in the first place. And so they offered me a package. I took it, and I was able then to do what I had dreamed of doing, and that was to enroll at Dallas Theological Seminary. At the same time, my high school classmate, my best friend, Bishop James Dixon, was at that point pastoring a pretty substantial ministry, and he offered me a position of youth pastor. And so I'm working in ministry, I'm married, and I recently graduated. And
Let me recap. You're married, new father, working 2 jobs. You're at the bank and at the ministry.
no, it just one picked up after the other.
You shift from the bank to ministry.
Right.
And so, Brown, you were working at that point, or you just stay home mom?
Right, when the baby was born, when I got pregnant, I was working at Texas Commerce Bank. We were both bankers at that time, downtown Houston. And then I stayed at home with the baby.
Okay.
And so I was at home, but that was a shift for me because I was an independent woman prior to getting married. I had my own money, own car, made my own decisions.
What you say?
And then I went from all of that, my own place, went from that to being dependent.
Mm.
And that's where the conflict
Confidence. Good. What was that like?
It's a challenge when you have to learn how to submit. And being raised in the church, I wanted to live as the Bible stated, but at the same time, I had that pull. I gotta ask him to do this, that, or the other. I gotta ask him to buy my personal products, ask him for money. I had a problem with that. And so it took me a while to get used to that. And then not only that, but remember, I went from being a single woman to now a mother and then a married woman. And so there was conflict. And so I think my husband at the time was a masculine, is that the word? He was you definitely masculine.
So somebody said misogynistic, dude.
Not misogynistic, but
No, not that.
he
Chauvinist?
he was
Traditional.
He was definitely traditional.
Traditional.
And definitely was raised to be a dominant personality in a relationship. And so that was a pull, a rub, a struggle, if you will.
What is your
Can I speak
model?
this right quick?
Yes. You're not going to get.
Yeah. So, just a little other background to add to the color of this whole thing. So, I come from a family where my paternal grandparents were married over 50 years. Till death they did them part. My father and his two sisters, I don't even know between the three of them how many times they've been married and divorced. I know my father and my mother married each other 3 times and divorced each other 3 times. On my grandmother's side, my maternal grandmother's side, I never met my grandfather. My grandmother had her children out of wedlock with married men. And so I don't have a good model of marriage. And then I went to, I ended up going to Mount Corinth again. Pastor Patterson is my father in ministry. So he and his wife became my marriage models. And I don't know if you knew of Dr. Patterson or not, but he was extremely authoritative, had a voice that sounded like God, and he became my hero, my idol, all of that. And I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be a husband like him. He had been married at that time, I suppose. Maybe they'd been married 30 years, maybe. They had, sons and daughter and all of that. And that was my role model. And I bought into, of course, he's from a whole generation before me that kind of had that iron-fisted way of doing everything, from pastoring to husbanding and fathering and all of that. So here I am now. I'm married, so I guess this is the way you do it. You got to tell your wife what to do. You got to this, that, and the other. And not only did it not work for her, it really didn't work for me. I got no joy out of it. That is not my nature, as far as I know, to be dictatorial and all of that. And if I could go back and redo and undo, that would probably be the season that I would just redo it, because I missed out on her genius. I missed out on her insight, her wisdom. She's far smarter than I am, and she just let me think I was driving the car. But the reality is, she was really the power. She was the force. She figured out how to gently steer from the passenger seat, and that likely is what kept us together during those early years. That she would even submit to a knucklehead like me.
Yeah, that was perfect, because that was my question. That was exactly my question. What was your model of marriage before then? You maybe can answer that afterwards, and how that affected. But also, I think I need to give context to those that are listening, that in Lewis Patterson, if you have a Mount Rushmore of preachers, not black preachers, preachers, the student of preaching will have him on there. His effect to the names that I would throw out to even Pastor Charles that was here just past Sunday, been here served for many years. The notion of expository preaching in our context, but not just in our context, throughout. He was known for, but not just for preaching, also for pastoral leadership. The pastor came out of Mount Zion here in Los Angeles under Dr. E.B. Hill, a different time. I think you all are coming up in the women's movement, women empowerment is happening right then, around that time. Those walls are smashing together. So could you just say something about just your model of marriage that you saw? It don't have to be in your family or whatever, that you brought into your now new reality.
Right, so quickly, I came from a single parent home. It was just me and my mother, and I'm an only child, single parent home. My mother was the provider, and all around, there was no model. I didn't have any grandparents that were married. My grandmother was a single woman, and her husband had passed away, and she raised her kids. And then uncles and aunts had been married and divorced, and so there was no model for me. However, there was this innate, if you will, burning, a yearning to be that role model for myself. I always wanted to be in a committed relationship with my husband, and I didn't see the model, but I wanted to break whatever I had seen prior to.
Absolutely. Well, that's interesting. So that means that there's problems that may come into the concept of marriage because there's a failure model, but then there may be a model that's not a bad model, but it's not the ideal model, or it's not the model to duplicate, because your context is different than theirs. The reality, the social norms are different than theirs. And, we don't really talk about that, because those are things that we try to keep undercover, because it's messy, and church don't like messy. Church like clean. Yeah, we don't do messy well. We like clean cut. Though everybody in here, every scenario, myself included, that you mentioned can relate to intimately. Everybody in here. And so, as you're getting into this reality and figuring things out on the job,
In real time.
what is the aha moment? Who helped spur that aha moment? And what would you say now to yourself back then that you wish you could have said back then to yourself?
That is so loaded. Let me start with the latter point first, and that is, what would I say to how was I getting married? 29. So I was in my late 20s when we got married, and I was a chronologically grown man, but I was really a big boy. And I would say to my younger self to grow up, to realize that life does not revolve around you. To realize that God has given you this jewel, this beautiful, bright baby mama. And other than Jesus Christ, she's the greatest gift I've ever had. I could ever have. And I'm not just saying that because she's here with me and got to go home with me. Although I'm saying it because she got to go home. But it took a season. You know how you can cook some food and the day you cook it, it's okay. But 2 days later, when the seasoning has kind of, yeah. And so God has been marinating this experiment, and it is getting better and better as time goes. And so she kind of alluded to some conflicts here and there. There have certainly been failures here and there. But I'm so grateful that we did not give up. And it was not because we hadn't wanted to give up. It was not because we couldn't, in terms of, this is what, we in LA at this point, you can walk away from any situation. That's the way of the world now. And so there was really nothing to keep us together other than the hand of God, and I think the bedrock of love for each other and then for our children. There was on one Sunday we took off from church and went to visit a church. And at this particular church, it was not Mount Sinai, but at this particular church, the preacher said, he was talking about marriage. The preacher said, don't give up before you grow up. And I cannot tell you how that ministered to me. Don't give up before you grow up. Yeah.
I think that for me, it was, I don't know if I'm answering the question or not, but just in terms of giving up, I just never wanted to let God down. And, I just kept aiming at it, that, I don't want to let God down. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And I would always search the scriptures. Do I have a reason to let him go? Do I have a reason to move on? And I was trying. But, I would come back and say, I didn't have that model. I want to be that model. And I don't want to let God down. I want to make sure that I'm right with God at the end of the day.
Is there a particular person, resource that you could point to that kind of helped y'all, guide y'all through that? And if so, what was that?
Yeah. I want to just suggest to anybody that is married and wants to be married to do not hesitate to get counseling. And I guess ideally, get Christian counseling, ideally. But seek good counseling. And so God put in our path one lady who counseled us and really helped us in terms of communication. She's a non-Christian. I don't even know what she is, but I know she's not Christian. But this lady helped me to understand part of my issue. And part of my issue was that I had abandonment issues. I had abandonment issues that trace back to when I was a little kid, and having issues with my father and all that kind of stuff. And I just learned that every experience in life, number one, is never forgotten in your head, in your brain. It's always somewhere in there. And it can affect you. It can affect your today and or your tomorrow until we learn how to process it, how to heal from it. And so that lady helped me with that. But then there was a godly couple. The husband is now in heaven. Their names are Frank and Bunny Wilson. P. Bunny Wilson. And we credit them as really being the human instrument that saved our marriage. They took us into their home, and they just shared out of their hearts and out of their own marital experience. They shared with us biblically, what some of our issues were, and they honestly helped us to heal. They helped us to, I think, see one another as partners, and not as whatever other cliches that may go along with being married. The old ball and chain, the old this or that. No, we are partners, and as partners, there has to be mutual respect. There has to be mutual appreciation. There has to be mutual sacrifice. And even if it's not mutual sacrifice, each person has to be willing to do whatever it takes. We often talk about it's a 50-50 kind of thing. No, it ain't always 50-50. On any given day, it's going to be 49-1, or the next day it can be 49-1 on the other side. It slides. And you just have to be long-suffering. 1 Corinthians 13, all of that comes into play if you're going to be married over time.
P. Bunny has several resources that I don't recall the names at this juncture, but Google her. Some of those resources were very helpful. One of my areas was that because only child, single mom, I never knew my father. Never knew my father. And so, and I had relationship abandonment or problems, issues. And I had, of course, my father never showed up in my life. And so for that reason, I had been hurt so often by men that there was this little girl in me that put up the guard. And she was standing there protecting. And she was like, oh no, you're not going to do me like this. And so his was abandonment. His little boy was like, oh, you hurt me. And I was like, and so they didn't, there was the conflict. And so because of that, I had to deal with that in counseling. I had to talk to her and let her know, it's okay, you can let go, you can let your guard down, and you can trust him. But when I felt hurt, I put that guard up. And so I had to learn how to deal with that.
Let's do some rapid fire stuff real quick. Pastor Brown, what is the goofiest thing you've ever done as husband? Take your time.
Goofy, yes. I don't know where to start. The goofiest thing I have done as a husband, the goofiest. I'm gonna have to pass on that. I don't know. There's so much goofy. That's all they see me as is goofy.
A couple questions we got was, and certainly, don't call me Shirley. A husband made a big purchase and didn't tell the wife. Can you relate to anything of that nature? And
do we have commercials in this?
All the time.
No commercial breaks. No commercial breaks.
Yeah. So the answer to the question is yes.
You done that? Oh, okay. Yeah. And how did you get through that season?
We're still
Use
praying
spiritual
through it.
words.
we're still, yeah, I have made a great number of financial flaws. And even beyond just the financial flaws, just the flaw of not communicating with her. Sometimes I guess I go back into a mode where, like when you grow up and you got your parents or your mother, whoever, and you do stuff to get away with it, or you do things and you're trying to get away with it. I'm like that with her sometimes. Like, she's the mom, and I try to hide, stuff and whatnot. Not big things, but just things.
I got you.
Yeah.
Sister Brown, challenges of being a pastor's wife.
Wow. Pressure. When I first became a pastor's wife, so I don't sing, and I don't play the piano, and that was, those expectations automatically come with this role. Say amen, y'all know. And so there was that. And I think the other challenges of being a pastor's wife is that, I don't know, because I don't really deal with that now. But I guess early on, the expectations of the people to be this person. We've been in ministry now, 30 years? We've been in ministry about 30 years now. And so, yeah, I don't really have that at this
point. You don't
Yeah,
play
it's
this.
like,
But I got you. But there was a time.
There was a time.
Your kids had to be perfect. You had to look a certain way. Always smile.
Well, my kids were gonna be perfect anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole look and the speaking in church and all of that. Yeah. On program.
Right. Put your name down and then action.
Right. Running the women's ministry.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Church something else, ain't it?
It's a lot.
Yeah. God bless the children. Pastor Brown, advice to a young couple, young couple. What advice would you give them?
Married couple?
Yes.
I guess first and foremost, make sure that you have a spiritual connection, because there will come a time when, I know she's going to be beautiful in your eyes forever, and I suppose likewise, I don't know, but there will come a time when you need more than good looks. There will be a time when you need more than what you thought you need, and the only sustaining power is the Spirit, the Word, the presence of God Himself. And I would add to that, not only have a spiritual connection between you two, have a personal relationship that you nurture, that's just between you and God. One of the beautiful things that I have seen in my wife as we've journeyed is to know that she has her own independent relationship with the Lord, that she reads her word, that she prays not only for her own specific and personal stuff, but our children, and she prays for me. And so to try and do ministry and to try and do the ministry of marriage without one's own personal relationship with the Lord is I believe it's a recipe for disaster. And even having the relationship with the Lord and having the spiritual connection and all of that, you're still gonna have trouble, heartaches, and pain. I honestly believe now, I don't know if I believed this when we started, I believe now that every trial, every tribulation, every heartache and headache, in the words of her grandmother, is the making of you. It's the making of your marriage. if you don't have some testimonies to go back to and say, now look at what God brought us through. If you don't have some stories about how the tough times, how God drug you through the tough times when you didn't even want to talk to each other, when there was no intimacy, when you know you try to touch her feet under the cover, then she pulled them back, all that kind of stuff. That you got to have you got to have a God who can pull you through it even when you don't want to be pulled through it. So that would be my scattered advice.
Sister Brown, how would you counsel a woman that is trying to stay in their marriage after the husband has stepped out the marriage and had an affair? How would you counsel a young woman?
Stepped out of the marriage and had an affair. I would say first and foremost, be prayerful. I would say seek the Lord, seek counsel. I have spoken to women in that situation, and I simply be prayerful, seek the Lord, read your Bible, and stay committed to the relationship until God gives you clearance to move. And don't do anything until you hear God say do something different. So stay right there,
Stay right there.
no matter what.
Gotcha. That's a rough one. Yeah, it's real though. Pastor Brown, how do you balance work and family?
I don't. No, it is. That is the $1 million question that every week I'm trying to get better at, because you never feel like you are really succeeding in both simultaneously. Sometimes when the church is going great because you've given more of your time and energy to it, there's a neglect at the house. But then if you give more of your time and attention and all of that at the house, then there's some issue at the church going on. It's just, and so I think, at the end of the day, my first ministry is my family. Before I'm a pastor, I'm a partner and a parent. And the church, and I just had to grow to this, since the church is not my bride, but is Jesus' bride, he can do a better job of taking care of his bride, and my responsibility is to take care of mine. So I'm really trying to get better in that. It is a challenge. It is a weekly challenge. But